Debate. The honourable member for Mississauga Lakeshore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before starting my prepared remarks, just a very quick clarification of the record. There was discussion earlier led by my colleague opposite from Selkirk Interlake Eastman that may have created the perception that we're somehow talking about the closure of bases. And I just want to assure everybody here that that was never discussed. The discussion was around the potential relocation of airborne sovereignty assets, alert assets, Mr. Chair, not the closure of bases, and that's to meet better meet an asymmetric threat. There was no discussion about base closures. Monsieur le Président, ce soir, tandis que nous sommes réunis pour discuter de l'important travail du ministère de la Défense nationale et des Forces armées canadiennes, nous devons nous rappeler qu'en ce moment même, plus de 1300 militaires canadiens prennent part à 15 opérations aux quatre coins du globe. Nous sommes directement témoins du soutien que fournissent ces hommes et ces femmes aux gens ici même au Canada, par exemple lors des événements récents à Fort McMurray. Mais nous devons nous rappeler aussi que nos hommes et nos femmes en uniforme ont aussi des effets positifs dans la vie de nombreuses personnes au-delà du pays, au-delà de nos frontières, que ce soit au Moyen-Orient, en Afrique, en Europe ou dans les Caraïbes. Les forces armées canadiennes sont des forces souples et adaptables qui sont capables de réagir de façon rapide et décisive. Grâce à leur expertise unique, elles sont capables de surmonter les problèmes de sécurité les plus complexes et elles sont aussi en mesure de collaborer efficacement avec autres ministères, des organismes non gouvernementaux, des pays alliés et des partenaires de coalition pour accomplir le travail qu'on leur demande. Nos militaires ont une réputation d'excellence et sont tenus d'haute estime tant qu'au pays qu'à l'étranger. Mr. Chair, this is being demonstrated right now in Iraq. As we all know, ISIL has killed thousands of innocent civilians and has displaced millions more. In fact, ISIL's advance triggered one of the largest refugee crises the world has ever seen. ISIL is undermining the stability of this and surrounding regions and has posed a broader threat to international security. That is why, since 2014, Canada and the Canadian Armed Forces have assisted Iraqis in their fight against ISIL as part of an international coalition led by the United States. From August to September 2014, Mr. Chair, the Royal Canadian Air Force delivered more than £1.6 million of military supplies to Iraq. From October 2014 to February 2016, our CF-18s conducted nearly 1,400 sorties and over 250 airstrikes. This air operation successfully struck hundreds of ISIL fighting positions, military equipment, and vehicles. Thanks to coalition efforts, Mr. Chair, ISIL has suffered significant losses in terms of fighters, assets, and territory. By the beginning of this year, the coalition forces had helped halt ISIL's progress and compromised its ability to fight. Now the Iraqi military is able to take on a more offensive role in battle. They are reclaiming territory and pushing ISIL fighters back into hiding. While ISIL remains a threat, the international coalition is undermining its momentum. Mr. Chair, against this backdrop, there was a need earlier this year to reassess Canada's contribution to ensure it remained meaningful and continue to respond to the most pressing needs of the coalition effort. In February, Mr. Chair, the Prime Minister articulated a redefined and refocused Canadian contribution that reflects a more comprehensive and whole-of-government approach, and more particularly that reflects the changing realities on the ground. This refocused approach was abundantly debated in the House. During the 5-day debate, no less than 98 members of Parliament had an opportunity to voice their opinions. This refocused mission, representing a $1.6 billion commitment over 3 years, Mr. Chair, was designed to maximize Canada's unique capabilities while complementing the efforts of our partners. The Canadian Armed Forces remain a central pillar of this new approach, with a commitment of approximately 830 military personnel. The military is shifting its focus toward the training mission on the ground by tripling the size of the Train, Advise and Assist mission in northern Iraq. The Canadian Armed Forces have already begun deploying the additional troops required for this training mission. We are also bolstering our intelligence capacity in support of this mission. This intelligence is informing the coalition's operational decision, and it's improving the coalition's ability to target and defeat ISIL. In fact, less than 2 weeks ago, on May 4th, the Minister of National Defence met with other defence ministers at a coalition meeting in Germany, and many of them spoke very highly of Canada's intelligence contribution. We also have personnel working in coalition headquarters and with the Iraqi government. A Canadian general officer, Mr. Chair, has been selected to lead the Global Coalition's ministerial liaison team, which is intended to provide strategic support to the Iraqi Ministry of Interior and the Ministry of Defense. We're expanding our medical presence both to serve Canadian and coalition needs and also to mentor local security forces. We're supporting capacity building efforts in both Jordan and Lebanon. And we're maintaining the refueling and surveillance aircraft and have deployed tactical air support, which began operating in Erbil earlier in May. Monsieur le Président, la nouvelle approche du Canada a été très bien accueillie par nos partenaires coalisés, en particulier par les États-Unis. Le président des États-Unis, Barack Obama, a récemment dit que notre mission de formation ainsi que l'élargissement de nos ressources de renseignement ont fait de nous un membre extraordinairement précieux de la coalition internationale luttant contre l'État islamique. Le secrétaire d'État John Kerry a reconnu que le Canada s'investit grandement dans ce combat et qu'il apporte une contribution énorme. Nous pouvons être extrêmement fiers de nos militaires. Comme le ministre de la Défense nationale a lui-même dit lors du débat en Chambre en février dernier, les forces armées canadiennes sont constituées d'hommes et de femmes fort bien entraînés et expérimentés. Ils s'entraînent pour accomplir leur mission et faire bouger les choses. Le chef d'état-major de la Défense a été récemment en visite dans le nord de l'Irak, où il a pu constater de visu les résultats concrets que les forces armées canadiennes produisent sur le terrain. Monsieur le Président, le nouveau mandat pour cette mission n'a pas été approuvé assez tôt pour qu'il soit pris en compte dans le budget principal des dépenses sur lesquelles nous nous penchons aujourd'hui. Cependant, Monsieur le Président, le ministère de la Défense nationale cherchera à obtenir jusqu'à 207 millions de dollars dans le budget supplémentaire des dépenses plus tard au cours de l'année. Je tiens toutefois à mentionner que ce chiffre n'est pas tout à fait représentatif de la contribution des forces armées canadiennes à la sécurité au Moyen-Orient. Et l'histoire se répète lorsqu'on jette un œil aux autres opérations militaires internationales. Dans l'ensemble, les forces armées canadiennes remplissent leurs obligations internationales grâce à une utilisation stratégique de leurs ressources limitées et à une mise en pratique des plus efficaces de leur expertise unique. Dans l'opération Reassurance, les forces armées canadiennes fournissent un soutien inestimable aux mesures de l'assurance de l'OTAN et à nos alliés en Europe, que ce soit au sol, en mer ou dans les airs. L'opération Unifier, plus de 200 instructeurs canadiens fournissent une assistance plus que nécessaire aux militaires ukrainiens. Au cours de l'opération Provision, les forces armées canadiennes ont joué un rôle instrumental en aidant les réfugiés libanais et jordaniens à entrer au Canada et en fournissant de l'assistance dans le traitement et l'examen préliminaire des demandeurs à l'étranger. Les forces armées canadiennes participent aussi à 5 missions de l'ONU, soit en République démocratique du Congo, au Soudan du Sud, au Golan, en Haïti et à Chypre. Elles contribuent également à une opération de soutien de la paix dans les péninsules du Sinaï, en Égypte, sous les auspices de la force multinationale et observateurs. Dans bon nombre de ces missions, les militaires canadiens occupent d'importants postes centraux et font preuve d'un leadership et un professionnalisme hors pair. Je répète, les dépenses de fonctionnement présentées dans ce budget ne donnent qu'un aperçu de la contribution énorme des forces armées canadiennes à la stabilité et à la sécurité dans le monde. Mr. Chair, a former UN Undersecretary General for Peacekeeping once aptly reflected that you cannot stand as an island of stability in an ocean of turmoil. We are truly blessed to live in Canada. We are far removed from much of the turmoil and violence that plagues so many parts of the world. But we cannot become complacent in our isolation. Despite appearances, we are not an island. We are intricately connected to a global network of forces, some positive and some negative. We are also a nation that embraces humanitarian values and prides itself in being a positive force on the world stage. So we must think about how we can continue to be responsible and engaged international citizens. Going forward, Mr. Chair, the government is undertaking a comprehensive defence policy review. This process will take a fresh look at the current strategic environment, consider the defence needs of Canada and Canadians, and set the future direction for the Canadian Armed Forces. While the policy review is still in progress, with Canadians submitting their views from across the country, I expect that international partnerships and operations will remain an enduring thread of Canadian defence. This year's activities, Mr. Chair, prove that Canada's military women and men stand ready to continue this proud legacy of international engagement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member still has 5 minutes remaining. The honourable member still has 5 minutes remaining. I didn't know whether he was wishing to pose questions.
Mr. Chair. Mr. Chairman, my first question is about international engagement and, in fact, the United Nations that many of us hold dear in this House and across the country. And Canada has a proud history of engagement with the United Nations. This is about sophistication, about building relationships, about conflicts that are changing rapidly, and about interoperability and governance, concepts that are new to the nature of conflict. And I'm wondering if the Minister of Defence could update this House on his mandate letter priority to renew Canada's commitment to the United Nations peace operations, including helping the United Nations respond more quickly to emerging and escalating conflicts. Are the Canadian Armed Forces members ready and prepared to undertake peace operations under the United Nations?
Minister.
Mr. Chair, I've been working very closely with the Minister of Foreign Affairs on this topic as we look at the various threats around the world. I'm also going to say we started the conversations at NATO as well on how we look at engaging in different parts of the world. United Nations has many missions, and how do we start integrating on the level of support? And we need to look at a much wider perspective than just from the military. We need to look at what the certain lack of governance, the vacuum that it creates for radical groups. We also need to look at early capacity building that can hopefully prevent conflict. So we want to make sure that anything that we do is we understand the conflict of the regions, not just one country, but the wider region, and that we look at the problem from a much wider, from a military perspective, but from a whole of government perspective. I'm happy to state even the counter-ISIL coalition that we are part of is starting to look at the whole problem of Daesh from a much wider perspective as well. Thank you.
The honourable member for Mississauga Lakeshore.
Mr. Chair, thank you. If I could ask a quick follow-up question on this reply by our honourable minister. As coalitions change, as coalitions broaden and new members are introduced with very different military cultures, very different political backgrounds, and very different conflicts that these members of their armed forces have gone through, I wonder if the minister could comment briefly on the extent to which the Canadian forces are equipped in light of their experiences and their cultural sensitivities and their sophistication to take leading roles in these broader coalitions that may include members that have not been part of these coalitions in past conflicts.
The honourable minister.
Mr. Chair, I think that's a great question that the member has asked. There's a very unique perspective that Canadian Armed Forces can bring from our various experience from the days, early days of UNPROFOR to Bosnia, most recently in Afghanistan, and now in Iraq. But we also have a additional uniqueness that Canada brings to the table, and that's our diversity, an understanding of different cultures, which provides a very unique capability for militaries. It's something that other nations just do not have. So there's many aspects that the Canadian Armed Forces can contribute with from our experience, from the uniqueness we have. And I also want to point out our troops from Quebec also have that just the language skill, and being able to build that rapport in the Francophonie area is another aspect of skill that can be brought to the table. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The honourable member for Mississauga Lakeshore, likely time only for one more question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I was very privileged and proud to serve in Iraq under the flag of the United Nations as a civilian officer. And while I disagreed strongly with the 2003 intervention, and nothing gave me more pride than our decision not to intervene in 2003, I am now very proud of the role that the Canadian Armed Forces are playing in Iraq, especially in the fight against the scourge of ISIS or Daesh. I'm wondering if the minister could take a moment to review the different missions that are going on around the world at the moment, including Iraq, in which Canadian Armed Forces personnel are engaged.
Well, Minister.
Mr. Chair, our current commitments, as you know, is in Iraq and Syria is the one that gets notable attention. But we do have members also as part of Op Reassurance in Europe. We have a company in Poland that does training and capacity building all across Europe. We have a frigate as well as part of the operations. We also have troops right now in the Ukraine, and I got to visit them and the wonderful work that they're doing. We conduct operations of counter-narcotics, which is Operation Carib in the Caribbean, with tremendous success. And there's a number of other operations that I can list off that may not have the large number of troops, but have a significant amount of impact, and our operation, the support that we provide in the Sinai is one example of this, where we have another Canadian general in charge of that very important mission.